Hello YouTube, this is my first ever video like this. I've never done one before, but I felt so compelled to make one after seeing The Last Jedi twice now, because I thought it sucked so hard, and I'm going to tell you why. So I've made some notes here on my computer. I'm going to read them as I go. So this is what I didn't like about it. I got about 5-6 reasons. Number one, it betrayed George Lucas's vision. So it's not that it was different. Different isn't the problem. It's that it was something else entirely. It had no right being called a Star Wars movie because it betrayed the heart and soul of Star Wars. To me, from a thematical storytelling point of view, it was the equivalent of changing certain aesthetics that everyone holds true, like what everyone calls Star Wars, because people know what Star Wars when they see a lightsaber and they see it, they hear the word Jedi, they hear the talk of the Force. It's like if you took those things out and set the film in modern day Africa. You would say that's not Star Wars. Like, yeah, that's right, because certain things are non-negotiable. Well, certain thematic and character and storytelling principles are non-negotiable, and this film just not only didn't have them, it seemed to be adversarial against them.
Well, when I did Star Wars, I consciously set about to recreate myths and the classic mythological motifs, and I wanted to use those motifs to deal with issues that existed today.
If you change certain essential elements of something, you don't revive it, you transmute it. Yes, the word is transmute. This word means to change from one nature, substance, form, or condition into another. Like changing a gold statue of a dog into a silver statue of a dog. It's still a statue of a dog, right? But you've altered the very substance of something while maintaining its aesthetics on the surface. So it's not the same thing, and it's now worthless. I wanted a story where right and wrong existed. Mentors meant something. The scope and scale were mythical, and where hard-won victories and hard-won character for the characters wasn't just pissed away in the wind. To me, the power of George Lucas's storytelling was that the character growth didn't come easy, but when it came, you knew that it was substantial and that it would stick around. So Luke, it took him a long time to learn how to become the Jedi that he became at the end of the third film, Return of the Jedi. He made a lot of mistakes along the way, um, and the character that he ended up with, I wanted to believe that it would stick, just like it did with Obi-Wan, just like it did with Yoda. It's not just my own personal preference. It's George Lucas clearly gave the hero mentors who were heroes in their own right, heroes of yesteryear, but they had substantial character, and it wasn't just going to be all of that character that you won meant something. It was going to stick around. Obviously, the way that he treated Luke showed that he doesn't have that same view. I just didn't like it. Yes, if 30 years means you betray everything you are and fundamentally become the opposite kind of person, then fuck that message. It's not just that it's unbelievable, it's that it's offensive. So it's not just that people go, how could Luke do that? It's like, okay, maybe Luke could do that. Maybe you could convince me that it's plausible that Luke could end up a shell of his former self. But why would I want that? Again, it actually undermines George Lucas's films. It actually takes Luke in the opposite direction, um, and he ends up coming back to his senses at the end anyway. So it was such a futile, facile, and what's the word, flaccid story where had to Luke had to go back to go forward. It's like, why don't you just leave him where he is? How about you challenge Rey's character? How about Rey, instead of making her fucking Mary Sue? How about you make her doubt herself and make her learn lessons instead of her being Luke's mentor? Does Rian Johnson understand how much these original trilogies mean to people? And the original six, I think all of George Lucas's films mean a lot to people. Their resonance and meaning transcend cinema. They are myths, and they inform our lives as human beings. If he doesn't see Star Wars that way, then fine, but go make your own fucking fantasy epic where your characters are wishy-washy and the character growth developed in your stories can be washed away in the next movie. So yeah, again, it's no secret that George Lucas was trying to make a modern myth, but Lucas clearly set out for his myths to be instructional, for them to have right and wrong, which is a very unfashionable idea these days. Good and evil existed in his myth, the way they've existed in all myths. And he wanted the lessons learned in these stories to actually impact lives. And I think he clearly has succeeded in that, and that's why I think he's a genius, and that's why I think that Star Wars was special.
I have a philosophy that we all teach, and we all teach every day of our lives. And it's not necessarily what we lecture. I've discovered kids don't like lectures at all. But it is really the way we live our lives and what we do with our lives and the way we conduct ourselves. And once in a while they listen to the lectures. So when I make the films, I'm very aware of the fact that I'm teaching on a much larger scale than I would just as a parent or somebody walking through life, because I have this megaphone. Anybody in the media has a very large megaphone that they can reach a lot of different people. And so whatever they say, whatever they do, however they conduct themselves, whatever they produce, has an influence, and it's teaching somebody something. I try to be aware of what it is I'm saying.
And Rian Johnson does not understand that. Again, it's not saying that Rian Johnson's choices aren't valid. I just think they're fucking stupid, and they're vain, and they're more concerned with subversion than creation. I can elaborate on that a little bit later. Also, one of the things I liked about Seven was that it surprised expectations. For all the talk of it being unoriginal, I think it actually did surprise you that, you know, Snoke, for example, who's he? I didn't expect to see that. Yeah, it surprised you in a believable and exciting way, but without giving answers. But when you know you're watching the first movie in a trilogy, it's okay, because you know that it's one story divided into three, so you're going to see the answers that you need that are not given in Seven are going to be addressed in 8 and 9. That's just what I wanted, because that's what a good story does. It's kind of like, again, that's what George Lucas did. You know, WWLD is what everyone should be wearing, in the sense that if George Lucas is the only guy that can create a modern myth with the power and resonance of Star Wars, which he clearly is, then maybe we should take it seriously, what he believed and what he set out to do, what his impulses were when he created Star Wars.
Because I think the core issues that I'm dealing with are, if they were valid 2,000 years ago, they've got to still be valid today, even though they're not in fashion.
Why are they out of fashion?
Because I think it's harder. The world we live in is more complex, and I think that a lot of those moralities have gotten to be grayed to the point where they don't exist anymore. But those issues are still there in most people's minds. The importance of, say, friendship and loyalty. I mean, most people look at that and say, how corny. But, the issues of friendship and loyalty are very, very important to the way we live our lives. But it's not common knowledge among young people. They're still learning. They're still picking up ideas. They're still using these ideas to shape the way they're going to conduct their life. And you need to tell the same story over and over again every generation, so that generation gets it.
You don't have to have the same story beats. You don't have to have the same plot beats. You don't have to have the same. There's so much room to create surprises while still honoring what George Lucas was doing. It's not really my fucking problem as well. I don't have to tell the writers how to do it. That's their problem. But by changing what Star Wars is, that's clearly not the answer. As you can see with this film pissing so many people off, and now the box office numbers are plummeting. Who is Snoke? So some of these questions that Seven actually raised. Again, it's like, that's kind of hard to believe that there wouldn't be peace after Episode 6 for like 50 or 100 years in the galaxy. But okay, I mean, you subverted my expectations, but at least it didn't feel like it was in the wrong spirit. It just felt like it was a little unplausible. But, maybe, 8 and 9 will give us answers. Who is the First Order? These are all common questions. Who's Rey? Why is she skilled in the Force? Despite what you might hear, these are important questions because they subvert the natural assumptions following Return of the Jedi. So yeah, Rey, we know that skill mixed with talent is what makes a Jedi. Training in the skills needed is what makes you a Jedi. And Luke and Anakin, who were incredibly powerful in the Force, still needed to be trained by mentors. Rian Johnson didn't think that was important. And don't blame us. Disney, you called it Episode 7, Episode 8. You intimated that it was a third trilogy and a trilogy of trilogies. So it's supposed to be one big story. It doesn't feel like one big story anymore. Not at all. So, second reason, the aesthetics were right, but the film was saying something completely different. So it's complex what makes Star Wars what it is. Fundamentally, I think is an old story with old values dressed up in futuristic aesthetics. The values Lucas imbued into Star Wars were and still are very out of fashion. I've addressed this already. Right and wrong, real heroes and villains, very distinct heroes and villains. It's very grandiose when you think about it, what Lucas was trying to do. It's an assertion of moral authority usually reserved for religions.
And I think we've gone for a few generations where a lot of the sort of more basic stories have fallen by the wayside.
And what do stories do for us in that sense? What are myths?
They try to show us our place. Myths help you to have your own hero's journey, find your individuality, find your place in the world, but hopefully remind you that you're part of a whole and that you must also be part of the community and think of the welfare of the community above the welfare of yourself.
I hear so many young people today talk about a world that's emptied of heroism, where there are no more noble things to do.
I mean, everybody has the choice of being a hero or not being a hero every day of their lives. And you can either help somebody, you can be compassionate toward people, you can treat some people with dignity, or not. And one way you become a hero, and the other way, you're part of the problem. And it's not a grand thing. You don't have to get into a giant laser sword fight and blow up 3 spaceships to become a hero. I mean, it's a very small thing that happens every day of your life.
This shows the fundamental impulse for the creation of Star Wars was to create a myth to pass on our truths to the next generation, the truths of our society that we had learnt down the ages. Johnson, conversely, seems confused about what he wants to say. He seems to deliberately want to add ambiguity. Example, Luke was a symbol of heroism. Or was he? Let's throw that into ambiguity. Why? It's a shit story. It's like, why not? Why? There's so much. It's just an ineffectual story. It only subverts your expectations. It also is a very bleak and cynical and hopeless view of the future. What are we to take away? That as you become old, everything you learnt, all the lessons you learnt, are replaced by despair. Like how when we understand that George Lucas's ideas transcended the films themselves and people took them into their everyday lives. That's the platform that Rian Johnson was given. He's coming in to say what exactly? He wants to say that old age is just full of, hopelessness. Lucas clearly showed old age was the result of your choices in young age. So Anakin and the Emperor ended up where they ended up, and Yoda and Obi-Wan ended up where they ended up, and they were a symbol of hope for Luke and for the audience, and vice versa for the villains. So it's a hero's journey. He used what's commonly known as Joseph Campbell's hero's journey I wouldn't say template, but cycle of as a basic sort of structure and rhythm for his storytelling. Again, he borrowed this from the greatest myths and religions throughout history. They all had this in common, this certain sort of cycle and pattern of story beats. George Lucas modeled Star Wars off of that. So it's all about the hero's journey, and we had heroes who needed to learn how to become heroes, which essentially, as well as being about learning skills and power, essentially it was a transformation of your heart. Lucas' 6 films, his original 6, centered on Anakin and Luke, who both had multiple transformations, but ultimately arrived at virtue, maturity, and the fundamental lesson that a virtuous life is the only life worth living. But at a high cost. A lot of failure, pain, and suffering occurred first as a direct result of their maturation, especially Anakin. Johnson seems to fundamentally want to show a hero who doesn't need to learn anything, someone who has it all inside and even provided guidance to Luke. A Mary Sue. Incredibly unengaging and boring, Rey fulfills classic mentor role while simultaneously being presented as the hero. So, yeah, it was just such a weak... Rey is such a boring character. There's nothing to be garnered from her lessons because they don't come at a cost. Everything just comes to her easily. It's a far cry from Luke, who made judgment errors all the time and succeeded against impossible odds eventually to become a heroic individual because of the choices he was forced to make throughout the story. Rey doesn't. It all just comes naturally to her. She has all the talent, but doesn't need the skill taught to her. She doesn't. The skill just seems to appear when she needs it. Obi-Wan, the original old Jedi, was mature and fully formed, and in his heart, he was complete. He was a fully formed, basically inhuman character. But that was by design by Lucas, because again he was a symbol of hope, and he was an example of what Luke could end up being, because this was a myth. This is the tenor and the tone of the story was not realistic. It was idealistic. It was a mythological view of the world. Though at the same time, the plot always felt grounded in reality, and the characters always felt grounded in reality in terms of the heroes like Luke, Leia, Han. They were always, even the droids were relatably very human, but the Emperor was very inhuman, and Yoda and Obi-Wan were very inhuman. Vader ended up being very human, but that was a great surprise. He started off very inhuman. So yes, Luke had his own story. Rey doesn't need mentors because she knows her own path and her heart already. Yoda said this in the Last Jedi. What a stupid fucking scene that was. Rey doesn't seem to need a transform or change. She was mentoring Luke at one point. Very un-George Lucas and very bleak about hope for the future, as I said before. Doesn't ring true that Luke would be learning from Rey. Lucas' moral lessons always rang true. Johnson's don't, partly because they're contravened within the film itself. So, there are plenty of times in the film where the film seems to say this, and then it says this. Again, this ambiguity thing. Luke wants the Jedi to burn, and then, oh, no, not really. Finn's going to sacrifice himself, and then flying into the big cannon, oh, no, not really. Rose will stop him, and then she's going to say, sacrifice is bad, after just potentially sacrificing herself to save Finn, even though he was going to sacrifice himself to save way more people. And Rose was called her sister a hero for sacrificing herself, and Admiral Holdo is presented as a hero for sacrificing herself, but then sacrifice is bad. It's just incoherent. Yeah, here's another big one. Plot over character versus character over plot. So, George Lucas, I believe, my personal idea on story is that plot is a result of character. So if you take away all the characters, you're left with a nature documentary, wildlife documentary. Nothing happens, there's no story. Because there are people, we have a story. So people are the building block of story, and what the decisions they make and the way they react to each other is where we get story. So you have to get the characters right. You have to get, for people to believe a story as though for it to have power, it needs to have believable characters. George Lucas understood this. The plot would always be born out of decisions the characters made. Rian Johnson seems to completely invert this. Another inversion where he would have, a great example is Holdo doesn't act believable. There's no reason that she doesn't tell everyone her plan. Because of this, the plot kicks into gear, and everyone, Finn and Rose go off on the planet. The plot hangs on that tenuous logic. Yeah, it happens all the time in this film. Why can't the Empire catch up with the, it's such a vital plot point. Why can't the Empire just catch up with and destroy the, the fleet? Oh, because they're lighter and faster. It's in space, they can't be lighter. Okay, and first of all, light speed ahead, or call in another fleet to sort of trap them. It's kind of so idiotic, but the whole story hangs off this. So because the plot, he has this grand idea of this plot that doesn't make any sense, because the people's decisions that give rise to the plot don't make any sense. Another great one is the way that Finn's flying towards the cannon, and all of the AT-AT stop shooting at him. I've watched this twice now. They stop shooting at him, even though Kylo says, take out that speeder. How did they... And even the ones that were shooting for a while kept missing him. How did they miss him? He's flying in a straight line at the same speed, basically. Then why don't they shoot them when Rose and Finn crash and land on the ground and Finn runs over to Rose? Why don't they shoot him then? Why don't they shoot him when Finn's dragging Rose back to the gate? Why does Luke show up and not tell them what his plan is? He shows up as an apparition, and instead of going, hey, I'm an apparition, this is all fake, you guys need to know this, because what's a key element in my plan is that I'm going to distract him whilst you escape. See, it's that's what Luke was actually planning to do. He needed them to escape for anything that he was doing to make sense. He doesn't tell them. He actually tells Leia, I can't save Kylo, I'm going to confront him. Why? Because the plot comes first. The characters don't really matter. So you just end up disengaging from this film, because you're like, I don't believe any of this shit. I don't believe any of these people. They could change at any moment. They could start acting irrationally, because the plot will come first. So it's a fundamental shit storytelling technique that Rian Johnson really needs to get a handle on, because it's terrible storytelling, and it's terribly idiotic to me. It just made the film like laughable, like at so many moments. Yeah, for all the talk of it not being Luke's story, he was the one who needed to undergo all this character growth and change, which is, again, in a hero's journey. That means you're the hero. If you're the one learning and changing all the time, then you're the hero. Or you're one of the heroes. And Rey doesn't change, but Luke does. So isn't it meant to be Rey's story? I'm confused. Alright, I'm going to break this video into 2 parts because this is going quite a long time. This is now, I'm about to hit 18 minutes. So yeah, I'll like and subscribe below, comment if you disagree or agree with me, tell me if you think I'm crazy, if you think I have a point. If you like these videos, I might be able to do more, but this is me signing out for my very first video. Thanks, bye.